Welcome to the Dusty Trails and Tall Tales podcast. Today we have a very special guest. His name is Randall Dale. He's an authentic cowboy and best-selling author with Dusty Saddle Publishing. He grew up in a ranching family and writes several popular series of westerns that bring grit and heart to the genre. Randall, thank you for being here with us.
Yeah, my pleasure. Glad I could be here.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about your background and what drew you to writing westerns.
Well, I grew up on a horse in southeastern Arizona. My dad had cows, and we leased several ranches, and we just punched cows ever since I can remember. I've been on a horse and just taking care of the cows and just lived the ideal life. I don't know if it could have been any better. I really enjoyed it and had a great time. My dad was quite a horseman. Uh, Sorry to say that I don't follow in his shoes nearly so well. I don't couldn't hold a candle to him. He really was quite a horseman. But like I say, just an ideal life, cowboy country life, small town, just really ideal situation.
Yeah. Well, it's a typical day like growing up on a ranch.
Pardon me?
What was a typical day like growing up on a ranch?
Well, of course, in the wintertime, we went to school. So we'd get up and go to school, and then we'd come back. A lot of times during the school, my dad would have my brother and I. He'd have horses or colts in the corral for us to ride. So every day we'd get back from school and we'd saddle up and we'd ride our colts. And about every time the colt would get to where that gum is getting to be a pretty nice horse to ride, we'd come home from school and there'd be two new colts in the corral, and the other two he'd sell them, and away they went. So we were just always breaking horses and just one after the other. And then, of course, in the summertime, we either building fence or checking cows, riding horseback checking cows. So I built a lot of fence and checked cows an awful lot. And that was back when some of the older cowboys that might be listening might remember the screwworm that we had, and we used to ride and we would rope those cows or steers or heifers, whatever had the screwworm in them, and we would rope those things and tie them down and doctor them, let them back up, and we'd go get the next one. So we roped a lot of cattle when I was young, a lot of cattle.
Yeah. How does that lifestyle translate into writing westerns?
Well, I think just the experiences that me and my brothers had when we were growing up, some of the things that we did, some of the things that we did on horseback, and other things that sometimes people write stories about what cowboys do on horses that are just so unrealistic. I think more than anything, when I say something in my book about riding a horse or doing something horseback, that comes from personal experience. We did that, and we did that every day.
Have you noticed what's some of your funniest examples of stuff that you've read that's not possible on a horse?
Uh, well, lots of times people might have to think about that. They may be riding bareback because they didn't have time to saddle, and then the next thing you know, they're roping a steer or something, dallying to the saddle horn. Just they don't. There's no continuity there. It's not. They're just not. It's not the real deal, and it's pretty easy to tell. It's kind of like when somebody's writing about the cows on a big drive, and they're all steers. Maybe they're taking steers north, and then first thing you know, they see a cow down, and they take care of the cows there. They just don't know the difference between a cow and a bull and a steer and a heifer. So it's in my opinion, that's pretty important when you're writing westerns. It's got to be authentic enough to where people can realize that it's the real deal.
Yeah. Well, how did you get started writing westerns?
Well, I never had any thought of being an author at all. I did grow up reading Louis L'Amour. I've probably read every Louis L'Amour book that he ever wrote. Later on, I got introduced to Jack Schaefer and read every book that he wrote. And my favorite book of all time, the all-time best Western ever written, in my opinion, is Jack Schaefer's Monty Walsh. He just an outstanding book, and one that's really true to character, and it's about the Old West, which was really interesting. But what got me started about probably 20 years ago. Of course, I'd grown up and was gone from the house, and had a wife and kids of my own. But my dad called me one day and he said, "Hey, I need to move some cows. Why don't you jump on over here and we'll move these cows from one pasture to the next?" And I said, "Okay, I can do that." So I got up early and drove over there, and we saddled up. And as we were riding out to go through the first pasture gate, he got to telling me a story. He had gone to a cowboy poets convention and just really enjoyed it. Just was enthralled with the poems and the cowboy people there and the stories that they told. And he just thought that was the best thing ever. And he said, I'm going to write me a poem. I said, "Really?" I said, "What's your poem going to be about?" And so he told me this story that he dreamed up, and it was a pretty darn good story. And I thought, well, that's really good. Well, he never did anything with the poem, never wrote anything. But as time went on, I started telling that story to my kids as bedtime stories. Just a fun story about a boy and his horse growing up in Clovis, New Mexico. And as I told it, then it, got bigger and better all the time. And as the kids grew up and my boys got older, they got into Boy Scouts. And so I'd go on the Boy Scout camp house with them and I'd tell it to the scouts around the campfire. And it was just a fun story that I just really enjoyed telling. Well, about 10 years ago, my kids, of course, they're grown and gone. They've got kids of their own now. And they said, "Dad, you've got to write that down. You've got to tell that story. So, you just got to write it down." And I thought, "No, that's not what I do. I'm not going to write that down." Well, they just stayed after me and stayed after me. "You've got to write it down for a legacy for your grandkids, if nothing else." And so one Saturday morning, I just sat down at the computer and I said, "Okay, I'm going to write this thing." Well, after 6 or so hours, I realized it was way more than just a little short story. So I thought, well, I'll just flesh it into a little Louis L'Amour sized novel, a story about a boy and his horse. And it's a modern day story. It's not an Old West story. It's a modern day story about a boy and his horse in Clovis, New Mexico. And so I wrote that as a book. It took me 4 or 5 months. And I really enjoyed it. I actually did. And when I finished, I sent it to the kids. And of course, kids are great. They always tell you what you want to hear. It's the best book they'd ever read, and oh my gosh, it's going to sell 1 million copies, and on and on and on. Well, it was, that's great to hear, but I had no aspirations to do any more. It was just for my grandkids that I wrote it. Well, unbeknownst to me, some of my kids sent the word copy on their computer in an email to other people. And then pretty soon I was getting emails from people that I didn't even know saying, "Hey, I really enjoyed your book. When's your next one coming out?" So I thought, well, people are enjoying it. What the heck? I'll write another one, because I really did. I enjoyed writing the first one. And so I wrote the sequel, The Boy and His Horse, Clovis, New Mexico, just a fun story. And self-published those. And actually, it went quite well. I won a Will Rogers Medallion Award for the first 2 books, and it
Wow.
just lit me on fire. So I wrote the next 2 books, got them out self-published, did the same thing, entered them in the Will Rogers Medallion Award uh, as a young adult category, and won 2 more Will Rogers Medallion Awards, which I'm just way, way proud of. So excited about that. And the series kind of took off on Amazon, and I won't say I got rich, but I made a little money, which is always a kind of a fun thing to do. And
Sure.
and after that, I thought, you know what, it was kind of fun. And so like I say, I read a lot of Louis L'Amour and Jack Schaefer when I was growing up, and I thought, well, I'm just going to try to write 1 or 2 of these books and just see how it comes out. And that's when I wrote the Branson Hawk series. The first series is called the Partner Trust series. The horse is called Partner, and the boy in Clovis, New Mexico, like I say, it's a coming of age story about a boy and his horse. And the second series that I wrote was the Branson Hawk series, and it just kind of was just a fun thing. I thought, well, I'll just tell a few stories and see what happens. So I wrote the first 3 books. I really didn't do much with them. I just wrote them and kind of held them in my back pocket. And then finally, I had been introduced to Nick Whale from Dusty Saddles Publishing, And
Yeah.
this was back before he really even had a publishing house. It was just he was the marketer, and so I hired him to market the books for me, and he did an outstanding job. And I'm assuming the books must have been pretty good because they just sold like crazy. They went at one, two, three in several categories on Amazon, which was really exciting to me, and made a little money on those, and that was really fun. And so I thought, well, I'll just keep doing this. But you know how life gets in the way, and so after the Branson Hawk series, I I retired from my job, and my daughter needed help building a house. So for a year, I built her house, helped her build her house, her and her husband. And then after that year was over, then my other daughter says, "Well, if you built them a house, why don't you come build us a house?" And so I helped them build their house. And so, you know, during that time, I didn't write any, and really wasn't, like I said, I didn't have any aspirations to be a writer. I just got lucky on a couple of series. And then a couple of years goes by, and I'm starting to get that writing itch a little bit more again. And that's when I called Nick Whale at Dusty Saddles again and said, "Hey, if I write some books, what do you think?" He said, "Oh, bring them on." Yeah, I said, you write well enough that we can sure sell a lot of books." And so I wrote some for him, a couple of three, and then I had a big break. One of our mentors, and you may have heard of him, and I'm sure your listeners have heard of him. His name is C. Wayne Winkle, just a very prolific Western author, wrote a lot of books, very good sales, and just really did a good job. Well, unfortunately, he passed away, and he was in the middle of his Reno Gates series. And Nick called me and he said, "Hey, we need somebody to take this and finish this series out. Would you be willing to do that for us?" Because he said, "Wayne liked your writing, and I think it would be appropriate for you to go ahead and finish the series out." Well, I did that. I wrote two books using the Reno Gates character, and in those two books, I introduced the next character, Cyrus Boone. So I was able to finish that series out. It was very well received, and people really liked it. Well, I say they liked it. A few people didn't because I killed off some of the good guys in the book, but
Yeah.
that's what an author does sometimes.
Yeah.
So anyway, I wrote started writing the Cyrus Boone books. The first book in the Reno Gate series that had Cyrus Boone in it is called "Where the Law Won't Ride," and that's where the young Cyrus Boone, he gets acquainted with Reno Gates, and together they kind of help take down and save a town that was being overrun by outlaws. Then the next book was Blood Trails and Bitter Ends. And then the next book after that is A Legacy and a Promise. And this is just where Cyrus Boone, now he's off on his own. And he's, because of the skills he learned from Reno Gates and some of the things he's done, he decides to be a bounty hunter. And he's a pretty good guy. He's a stand up kind of guy, but he chooses to be a bounty hunter. First of all, he has to make a living, but second of all, he'd seen what happened to his family when his family got killed by some outlaws, and Reno Gates, his friend, got killed by some outlaws. And he sees this and he says, "You know, we got to we got to get these people out of doing damage and harm to other people." And so that's where Cyrus Boone comes in, and it's been, I think I'm on the sixth book now there that has been really well received. My newest book that you're showing there, The Last Stage of Redemption, that wasn't the newest one. That was probably two or three back. That was an interesting book about a very charismatic outlaw who just, we all have known those people who you just like them, no matter what they do. You just like them because they're very charismatic and just can get people to do things they would never ordinarily do just because they're so charismatic. And this is a story when Cyrus Boone goes in to arrest this charismatic outlaw and how he turns people against Cyrus and different things. So that's been a pretty good book. It was very well received. The one after that called Steel Tracks and Cold Justice, about a widow woman, a railroad magnate's widow who hires Cyrus Boone to bring in the outlaws that that killed her husband. And when Cyrus Boone, when he first gets the assignment, he's kind of questioning whether this is really the right thing or not. But the money's so good, he says, "I, got to do it." And then the
Yeah.
more he gets into it, the more investigating he does, the more he realizes there's a way more to this story than just what this widow woman and her hired man are telling him. So so he kind of goes a little bit rogue and does things his own way, and kind of comes out in the end on top there also. So that's that's the quick version of kind of where I started and what I've done.
Yeah. So how do you keep? Is each story a standalone story, or are they all continuations of basically the
Yeah,
same plot lines?
right. Every story, every book that I write can be read as a standalone. They don't have to necessarily read the prior ones to understand anything in the new one. However, they would get more of a feeling for the character if they started with the first books and read all the way through from one to the end. They can be read separate, like I say, but to get the real feel for them, it would be beneficial for people, I think, to read from book one and go on.
Yeah. Well, what was it like taking over from Wayne? Did you go back and read everything he wrote in the series, or
Not everything, because he there were like 17, 16 books out, and but I did go back and I went through and read quite a few of those to kind of get an idea of his character and how he acted and what he did in different situations and things. So yeah, I did my research, and I think at that point in time, I think Reno Gates came out well, and I was told that Wayne Winkle's widow even liked the book, so that made me feel really good.
yeah? Well, when you write different series, do you approach each one differently, or do you go back and forth between the series? How does that work for you?
I typically write when I'm in a series. I'll write that series. I don't like to have 3 or 4 or 5 books going at the same time. And I write a little, probably a little different than a lot of authors do. A lot of authors, they'll have their beginning and their ending, and they will outline every single chapter, and they know exactly what's going to happen all the way through the book, from the first page to the last page. Well, that's not the way I do it. I may be a little maverick in that sense. I know kind of where I want to start, and I know kind of where I want to end. And as I sit down to write, I just let the movie play in my head, and then I type as fast as I can to try to get all of that action on the page. And it's really interesting that sometimes writing that way, my imagination or whatever it is takes over, and different characters will show up, and different avenues or different situations will arise that I never would have thought of otherwise, but they just kind of appear in the movie in my head, and I'm thinking, wow, this is really good. So I just take it and run with it.
Yeah, that's the way I write as well. I don't see how people can plot out and outline everything. I kind of have an idea what I want to write toward, and then I'll start writing and see what happens.
Yeah, well, good for you. That's sure the way I do it. So I'm glad to hear there's somebody else that does it the same way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, which one of your characters do you feel closest to? Do you have a favorite?
Actually, the boy in the horse story, Ricky Richardson from Clovis, New Mexico. Uh, I should never say this, but I patterned him after my brother, who was really a horseman and an excellent roper, and just could do things. He was really good. He's quite a cowboy. Uh, and Ricky just kind of grew up with me when I wrote that. I just watched him grow and develop and become the man that he became, and finished out that story, the original story of my dad. So if I have an affinity to any one particular character, that's who it would be. It would be from the Partners Trust series, that the boy and his horse.
Yeah, that's the story your dad told you.
Yes, sir. Hmm.
Yeah, is that still available on
Oh
Amazon
yeah.
or?
Yes, it is. In fact, it's actually the whole series is available as one 99-cent book. So if somebody wants to take it, they can take it and run with it, because it's it's pretty good. It's not a shoot 'em up western by any stretch. I mean, it's the boy and his horse in modern day Clovis, New Mexico. He has to. I'll tell you the beginning of the story. He's he graduates from high school. He gets a job in a feedlot and just loves the cowboy way of life. That's what he's always wanted to do. He's always wanted to do that. Well, during his work at the feedlot, a horse falls on him and breaks his leg. And he just had gotten married. I mean, just a young couple starting out, and here he is with a broken leg. He can't do anything. He can't work. And feedlots aren't like working for Honeywell or IBM or something where they give you sick leave or anything. It was a feedlot. When he couldn't work, and he just didn't get paid. And so for 6 weeks, they just live on nothing until he's well enough to work. And then he goes to try to find a job, and the feedlot had already hired somebody, and he wasn't there anymore. And so finally, he gets a call from a guy in Texas that says, "Hey, I've got 2,000 yearlings coming in on this wheat field, and I need somebody to take care of them. And I hear you're a pretty good hand." He said, "Oh man, that's where I want to work. I need a job." And the man says, "Well, show up on Monday morning with your horse." And Ricky said, "Well, I don't have a horse. I'm broke. I sold everything I had just to live for the last 6 weeks." He said, "Well, you got to show up with a horse." So he buys this renegade horse, the only one he can find. And the story goes on from there about how him and the horse just kind of grow into a team and become one. And everybody that's ever had that one special horse, this is a story for them because this was Ricky's one special horse that he just loved to the very end.
Yeah. So that series is basically young adult.
It was, it's interesting. It won the Will Rogers Medallion Award in the young adult category. So it I guess it's considered a young adult. But it's really interesting. I get phone calls. I still get phone calls occasionally or emails from older ranchers that have read the story, and they love it. They remember those horses and the way they used to do things. So it's not necessarily just a young adult. I mean, it's like I say, it's not a shoot 'em up western. It's just a good story. Just goes from one chapter to the next. It's not. I wouldn't call it exciting. In fact, I got an email from a lady one time. She said, "It's really interesting. I found myself reading your book and was just enthralled. And then I realized, well, this is just the everyday boring stuff of a cowboy on wheat fields taking care of a bunch of steers." But she says it was just so fascinating. I couldn't put it down. So that made me feel really good. It's not like I say, it's not an exciting uh, shoot the bad guy or chase whatever. It's just a good story about a boy and his horse.
Well, I think I'm gonna have to look that one up and read it myself now.
Well, good. That's what I'm hoping.
Well, what is it about the Western genre that you love so much, and what draws you to writing Westerns as opposed to another genre?
Well, of course, I grew up ranching and riding and just been a cowboy my whole life. And so it was logical that I would go that direction. I have read, I'll confess that I have read some like Robert Ludlum and those type of thrillers. I enjoy those, but at the same time, I, I'm not into that. I don't know anything about world politics. I don't know anything about how the CIA works and all of those things. And so obviously I can't write anything like that, and really wouldn't want to anyway. But the Western genre is just good. Sit down for an afternoon and read a good book and just enjoy yourself. And then when you're finished, and you can move on to the next one.
Yeah. What do you think sets the Western apart from other genres?
I My own personal opinion is the Western is just down home. I mean, you see the good and the bad in the world without it being so much, the modern day, the scary, scary stuff that we all deal with anymore. It was just the way it was. The West is just, it was, it took hard men. They lived hard lives, hard women who lived hard lives, and they just did what they had to do to survive. And some of those things today, we can't even imagine some of the things they had to do to just survive. So I think we can take a lot of heart from those types of books that where we see those people that just struggle every day for everything that they've got and have to make do with what they had. So I really enjoy those.
Yeah. Have you noticed the Western genre evolving? over time, especially in recent years?
I have. I've seen, there for a while, the Louis L'Amour books and Jack Schaefer books and those types, they were the ones. And then nobody else, very few people. Max Brand got into it a little bit. There were a few of those that kind of got into it and wrote some, but they just never really took off. But and we saw that also on TV and movies there for a while. John Wayne was big, and there were lots of westerns that they made. And then for a long time, it was just a drought. They really didn't make very many westerns. And I think that's the same way it was with the books. But it's been really interesting to see the resurgence and people reading westerns again. I think just for that reason, they just see hardworking, a lot of them good people doing what they can to survive. So I'm really thrilled to see the western coming back and some good stories coming out from that.
Yeah. Well, you think that it's because the westerns are starting to resonate as far as their traditional values and the way the world's going?
I definitely do feel that way. I feel that the people there again, they like to read, about the way it was, and to a certain extent, it can be a little nostalgic when you read that and think, "Well, I wish I could have lived back then." So, so yeah, I'm seeing a real resurgence. And you look at the publishing houses, those there are a couple in particular that are heavy into westerns, and they're going great guns and got a lot of new authors coming out, like you, for example, that that decided to get in the genre and write some books and move forward, and so that's a good thing.
Yeah. We got a question here from Mike. We'll pull it on the screen. It says, do you think the Western hero has changed over time, or are we still chasing the same archetype?
I I think it's still a lot the same. I think the formula was there for the books in the past, and I think the formula still remains for the books of today. Although there are getting to be some more twists and turns, I think different things that they may not have done back then. But I think for the most part, it's still the good guy, wearing the white hat, six gun at his side, trying to keep the town free from danger. That's still the type of main character that people seem to enjoy. And there again, at the end of the book, when they finish it up at the end of the afternoon, they think, well, that was a pretty good book, and I'm glad it came out the way it did.
Yeah. Well, how do you get inspiration for your new stories, like in your Cyrus Boone series?
It's interesting. I tell my wife I'm a dreamer. Sometimes I wake up in the morning and think, man, I had the best dream. It's going to make a great book. So sometimes they just kind of come to us, and you're probably the same way. They just kind of come to us. Oh, this would make a good story. And also sometimes things even semi-modern, when you read about it, you think, well, I could adapt that and make that into a nice little Western novel. So ideas come from all kinds of places. I've heard of authors almost requesting submissions from people of ideas for books, and sometimes they take those and run with them. I personally have never done that. I've got enough lame brain ideas that I can flesh out, so I'm pretty excited about that.
Yeah. I've never even heard of that before.
Oh, really? Yeah, I've heard of people doing that, where they would say, "What do you think the next book ought to be about?"
Huh.
And so they get ideas.
What do you find most rewarding about writing your westerns?
Well, obviously the fun part is when it comes up on Amazon, it starts to sell a little bit, and then the reviews come in, and they say, "Wow, I really like that book," or another good book from Randall Dale. That always makes me feel really good because, quite honestly, you can't write for the money. I've always said that you can't write for the money. You've got to write because you enjoy it. If you're only writing for the money, you need to go get a job.
Yeah.
And so as long as you're enjoying it and having a good time, I think you can write and feel good about it. And getting those good comments is always very rewarding. But like I say, and the money, if a little bit of money comes in, that's all fine and good too. But mostly it's just the enjoyment of writing and the enjoyment of knowing that people are reading and feeling good about the books that you write.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I write too. It's fun. Like Louis L'Amour said, rice to find out what happens next.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, especially people like us that write that way. We don't know, we don't have it outlined. We just watch the movie and get it down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what's your typical writing routine look like?
I try to write at least 5 days a week, and I try to write for about 4 hours. And if I can write for 4 hours, I feel pretty good about it. But I'm also one of those kind of guys. I grew up moving all the time, punching cows and things, and so when my 4 hours is up, I go outside. I go do something, either saddle up and go riding or go check cows or whatever. Uh, so so if I can get 4 hours a day and get a good chapter written, and then go do something outside and feel good about that, then that makes my day complete, and I'm ready to do it again the next day.
Yeah. And what advice would you give for someone who wants to start writing westerns?
I would say, first of all, find the books that you really like. For me, like I said, Jack Schaefer's Bunny Walsh is the best book ever written, and I read it over and over and over. And I would suggest, if somebody wants to get started, they find the best book ever written as far as they're concerned, and read it over and over and see how the author puts it together. How does the author describe the scene? How does the author bring characters together? How does he develop his characters? Those kind of things. If you'll analyze that book a little bit and see how a successful author has done it, then just mimic that, what you learned, and take that off and say, okay, I can do that too. And then find a confidant that you can have read your drafts. I think that's, personally, I think that's really important. That there, sometimes I'll write a book and I'll think, well, that's pretty good, and I'll give it to some pre-readers, and they'll say, well, did you think about this, or this didn't make sense, or whatever. And that always helped a lot, if I can get a little feedback, so that I can polish the book a little more before I send it off.
Yeah, for me, the greatest book ever written is by Louis L'Amour. It's Flint.
Oh yeah, that's probably my second favorite. Yeah, that is.
I've
That,
read that one a dozen times probably.
yeah, yeah, that's a
Um,
good one. Hmm.
but Louis L'Amour is a big influence for me growing up, which is why I kind of am glad to see that you write some young adult westerns, because, well, even though they're not technically classified as that, because I think we need those type of books to get younger children more involved in the western genre and going forward, because we're not exactly getting any younger.
That's that's exactly right. And the other thing too about Louis L'Amour, he could do it without. He could write those really good books without a lot of the sex and everything that people seem they want to put in every book now. I don't. There's none of that in any of my books. I wouldn't be afraid for any of my grandkids to read any of my books. There's nothing there that would shock them or would embarrass me after they read it. So, I've heard of others. I know Lane Warinsky said the same thing. There's no reason for that kind of stuff. So yeah.
Yeah. So what we've talked about books and such. What are some of your favorite Western movies? Uh,
Hmm. Well, of course, all the John Wayne. I think if anybody you ask that to is going to say the John Wayne movies. They were all just good. I really enjoyed those. I liked a lot of the old Jimmy Stewart movies. The Oxbow Incident, I think, comes to mind. One of the great Western. Uh, Even back to some of the old uh, Gene Autry and Roy Rogers and Rex Allen movies that were just good, clean, fun movies that you could watch in an hour and 10 minutes, and uh, and feel good about it. And at the end, when you're done, you're smiling, and the good guy always wins in the end. So I enjoyed those also, but I think probably my favorite is the Oxbow Incident. I really enjoyed that, and of course there are a lot more in thinking about them, but there are quite a few good Western movies that I've seen.
yeah. Well, if you could recommend one book or one film to someone who's never seen a Western or read one before, which would it be?
Well, I think Money Walsh would be the book that I would recommend. It's very, very descriptive. It's very true to life of the Old West cowboy style. It's very nostalgic. It's about uh, I don't know if you've ever read it. Monty Walsh is just a young cowboy just growing up in the West. And it goes through his life, and he gets older. As he gets older, the West is changing. They bring in the barbed wire, that type of thing. But just an outstanding book, and almost to the point of being melancholy at the end when you just see him, accepting the new way of life, and that's just the way it is, and the old days will never come back. So as far as a book goes, that's probably the one that I would recommend. And there again, the Oxbow Incident is just a really good Jimmy Stewart Western that I really enjoyed, and he made quite a few. They they did make one years ago called How the West Was Won with, you'll have to help me, Matt Dillon, what's his name?
James
James
Arness.
Arness. James Arness. And that was really a good series. That was an excellent series. I enjoyed that. And some of the newer ones, that Free Range with Kevin Costner, was
Open Range.
was was really good. I really enjoyed that one. So yeah, there's getting to be a resurgence. I think people are going to start making westerns again, and of course the uh, Lonesome Dove and the other Kevin Costner one, Dances with Wolves. Some of those were really good movies too. And you
Yeah,
don't have to be a Western fan necessarily to enjoy the movies, just because the story's so good.
yeah, that's true as well.
Mm-hmm.
Did you, since you like the Monty Walsh book so much, did you see both of the movies that were adapted from it?
Yeah, but they were both disappointing. Because the book was just so good, and we've all seen that where they make a movie out of a
Yeah,
good book, and they just never can hold it up. But they were entertaining. I will give you that, they were entertaining. But just if I'm going to spend an hour and a half watching a movie, I'll spend 3 hours reading the book. So
yeah.
yeah,
Well, what do you have coming up? What are you working on this be released next?
I've got the next book in the Cyrus Boone series. It's called The Fog Runner, about an escaped prisoner from San Quentin that escapes in the fog. And that one will be out probably next week. I should get it over to the publisher uh, maybe tomorrow, Monday at the latest. So it should be coming out before very long. And I'm really excited about an upcoming collaboration I've got with R.S. Payne, just an outstanding Western author, just starting out, but just I've read the books. The Colt McCrae, his character is Colt McCrae, just a really well thought out character, and RS just writes so well that I'm really excited to do a collaboration where we're going to bring Cyrus Boone and Colt McCrae together, and have them solve a crime. So I'm excited about that, and I think as time goes on, people will see R.S. Payne's books and they'll know, wow, this is going to be a good book, and they'll want to pick it up.
Well, how do you approach a co-write like that? How does the process work for you?
What the way we've done it in the past is I will write a chapter, and then whoever I'm co-writing with will write a chapter where we just take what happens. And it's interesting to do it that way because there again, the movie plays in my head, and I'll send my chapter off to the other author, and they'll write their chapter and come back, and it's never the way the movie played out for me, and so I have to start a new movie, which is really entertaining to do that, because I get to see several different movies in the course of one book. So that's one way to do it. Other ways I've I haven't done it, but I've seen do it, is where someone will write 4 or 5 chapters, and somebody else will write 4 or 5 chapters. But personally, I like the one chapter at a time, back and forth, and it works really well, at least for me and the people that I've co-written with.
Yeah. What do you hope readers take away from your books?
Well, as much as anything, I want them, when they sit down in an afternoon and just read the books. When they finish 3.5 hours later, I want them to get up and stretch and say, "Wow, that was a good book. When's the next one coming out?" That's what I hope that they take away, is just knowing that it's a good, quick read, entertaining and fun to read, and enjoyable all the way around. I don't know
Yeah.
that I'm trying to instill any life lessons in anyone. That's really not my job. I just want to entertain them for 3 to 4 hours and have them get up and say, wow, that was really good. I enjoyed that.
Yeah. Well, what's the best way for our viewers to find out more about your work or to find your books?
Well, all of the books are on Amazon, so if they'll just type in Randall Dale Westerns, there are a bunch of them that'll pop up there, and they can start looking through those. And if they like them, obviously we all appreciate reviews that and just say something about why they liked them, and we'd love to hear that.
All right. Well, Randall, thank you for sharing your story with us today. Thank you for being here, and wish you all the best success with your writing, and enjoyed the conversation.
Well, thank you, and you too, and success on your writing, and thank you for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay, goodbye.
Well, goodbye.